There's very few people on the screen anyway. Are we ready? Not yet. Oh, you'll tell me. Why? My nature harassment. I'm doing it for a whole career.
You need a passport or?
We're ready. We're ready. Did you hear her?
Did you say ready?
Yeah, you did. We're ready. See? That's it.
We're ready. Okay, let's welcome to the meeting today of the WETA, and Melanie, would you please call the roll?
Director Wonderman,
Here.
Vice Chair Moyer,
Here.
Director Alba,
Here.
Director Del Bono.
Here.
Director Dukes. Here. We have a quorum.
Thanks. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. And I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, let's get her going. So welcome to today's meeting of the WETA Board of Directors. The meeting is being conducted in person and by video conference, and it is being recorded. To reduce background noise, all video conference participants will be joining the meeting in listen-only mode and muted during the discussion. WETA welcomes comments from the public. A public comment period will be set aside after each discussion period and will be accepted in person and by video conference. Video conference participants wishing to speak are requested to please email your name and item number you'd like to comment on to boardofdirectors@watertransit.org. If you're unable to send an email, you will be given an opportunity to speak on the item after those who have signed up. Thank you. So we'll move to item number 3, which is a public hearing on proposed fiscal year 2024 through 2028 FAIR program. WETA is conducting a public hearing concerning the proposed fiscal year 2024 to 2028 FAIR program. If the proposed program is approved, the program would define annual fare adjustments for both regular and special event services over a 5-year period beginning July 1, 2023. I'll ask staff to introduce the item before opening the floor to the public. Anyone from staff can introduce it.
Good afternoon, Chair Wonderman, the Board of Directors, Pratik Kupadan, with Planning and Development WETA. So
Louder, please.
Yeah, can you speak up a little louder, please, if you can?
so this item, this is pertaining to the approval of their policy and FAIR program. And we are requesting the FAIR program entails small regular fare increases from fiscal year 2024 to 2028. And it rolls into the FAIR program, the special event service fares as well, with the goal of full cost recovery. With that, I'll just, conclude here.
Thank you. The public hearing is now open to receive comments. Speakers are asked to clearly state their name and city of residence for the record and to limit their comments to 3 minutes or less. Floor is open for comments. Melanie, has anyone signed up to comment on item 3?
We just received that, we received the English Bay Area comment.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, we did, Chair Wonderman received a letter from Seamless Bay Area on the adoption of
Oh, yeah.
this policy.
They liked it.
They liked it. It was different than different than the public hearing on the PAIR program, but still connected to, obviously, to the program. We received a number of comments from the public due to our outreach over the last month or so, and most of that comment, I would say, overwhelmingly in support of the adoption of the.
Okay,
And Chair Wonderman, if I may, just to be clear, there is a separate item on this agenda for you to consider adopting the program. This is just.
just a hearing.
Public to be heard in a properly noticed public hearing.
Okay, appreciate. Is there anyone here at Pier 1 who'd like to comment on the FAIR program? Is there anyone in the virtual meeting who would like to comment? You could raise your hand. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and our thank you. So item number 4 is the report of the board chair. I don't have a long report today. I've been riding the ferry regularly from Oakland to San Francisco and back most days because I'm back in the office most days. Rode the special event from Chase Center back to Oakland the other night, with the exception of the Warriors losing. It was a pretty good experience, and want to thank Tom Hall for fixing a little problem I had getting the ticket through the app, but we resolved it, which was good. And I'm seeing what feels like more people, at least on a regular basis, especially on the return trips. The morning trip kind of quiet, return trip at 5:25 pretty busy, and it's kind of nice going by the piers here and seeing so many people riding the ferry. And I think we know why they're doing it. We're providing a really good service. It's very reliable, and it's best part of my day. And I want to thank the workers, from the blue and gold workers, make it really great. Everybody contributes to very positive environment and so forth. So I think the more that we can do to, this would be a really good time as we're moving toward into the spring and the summer months to do promotion, to get the word out as much as we possibly can. It's, a number of people will mention the closure of Nordstrom and Whole Foods, and there's sort of a run on the bank and in a narrative that says that San Francisco is really falling apart and all of that. And a big part of the solution of that is bringing people, making it possible for people to come, making it desirable for people to be here. It's really critical. And the ferry system, our ferry system, provides that opportunity. And I think if more people knew about it, experienced it once or twice, they would be more likely to come back into the office more frequently and more likely to, visit attractions and so forth. So I will leave it at that. But I think we're providing an outstanding service, really valuable service, and the public is responding. So I will stop there and ask Director Moyer and the other directors to make comments.
No comments from me today.
Thank you. Director Alba,
No comments from me.
Director Delmano, Director Du.
Thank you. So I attended the Highway 37 polling meeting, and there was a mention there that STA is discussing ferry service from Bland to San Rafael. So I thought that was interesting and of note. I have been appointed to the Transportation Subcommittee for the Solano Transportation Authority. The first meeting is July 12th at 4 p.m. I also wanted to share, I've been in Sacramento all week for California Association of Realtors, and I learned that there are a lot of challenges with grid expansion. And so, like, for example, there was one project in Solano County, not by the water, but they were told by PG&E it's going to be 3 years before they will be able to connect. So I just wanted to share that concern.
Yeah.
City of Vallejo submitted a marina project to Assemblymember Wilson's office on Friday. I don't have the details yet, but it is marina related. And I did take the ferry over here today. It was exciting to see the garage had more cars. However, the parking fee was increased. It was $8.40, so I'm not sure how that happened. But that's the city, not us, of course, so I will be taking that up with the city. There was a lot more riders on the ferry today as well. It seemed like 100, a little over 100 maybe on the 11 o'clock ferry. And there were many people there. There was 10 people in line to get the paper ticket. I understand that it's going to be switched so that people will be checking for their tickets in advance of getting on the ships in the summer, I guess. So I think that'll help with a lot of different problems, but I'll discuss more about the ticket versus mobile later on in the.
Right.
Thanks, Director Duke. With that, let's turn it over to staff for your presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair Wonderman. Your observations about ridership are right on. We're seeing continuous increases in ridership. We have a long way to go, obviously, but it's good that we're moving in the right direction, at least not taking any wrong turns while we return to ridership that will eventually get to 100% of what it was pre-pandemic. But we need to do better than that to make our service financially sustainable. There'll be more discussion about that when we get to our budget item. The couple items I wanted to focus in on. One is some kudos for our blue and gold crews. We had, I think maybe on at the same game that you attended, Warriors game that you attended, Chair Wonderman, a child who was left behind on the shore side when the boat left for Vallejo. And the crews did a great job, or sorry, for Oakland, the crews, was Oakland or Vallejo, which service was Oakland. The crews did a great job circling back and reconnecting that child with the family on the vessel. So just wanted to give them some attention, some kudos for doing that and handling what could have been a tough situation in exactly the right way. Also wanted to compliment Congressmember Garamendi. It's covered in our federal legislative report, but he's done a fantastic job working with us on our budget requests, has submitted those requests, and we led the effort to get his colleagues to sign on to those requests. One of our key requests, obviously, is for the reconfiguration of the Vallejo terminal so that we can reduce the demand to dredge there. And he just recently held, yesterday, I think, held his staff retreat on our system. So they're big fans of SF Bay Ferry in the Garamendi office, and we're going to continue to work closely with them to do some great things. Other things to celebrate: the TIRCP grant award, $13.8 million. We put word out that we received that grant award for our first money for electrification of our Transbay service. We're approaching $100 million towards our decarbonization program. So compliments to the grant staff here, Jen, Aaron, Lauren, for working on the advocacy front to demonstrate how much support this effort has from the communities that we serve. It's just amazing to think that we've raised almost $100 million in a few years. And just a few years ago, we didn't think that we would be able to do anything on the zero emissions front at all. So we hear from the CalSTA staff who reviews and awards these grants that our applications are some of the best, highest scoring applications that they've seen. I don't think we got exactly a perfect score on this one, but we're the only agency to receive a perfect TIRCP score for our previous application. That was also the sea change is ready, getting close to being ready to launch. We're anticipating a June launch of the service that will be the first hydrogen ferry service. It will travel between in the world, really. It'll travel between Pier 41 and the ferry building starting sometime in June. I wish I could give you an exact date, but there's still a lot of variables that need to be worked out. Good news that we've all completed almost all of the agreements necessary to implement that service. There are some key milestones coming up before we do launch that we'll be celebrating. One is the first fueling of the hydrogen vessel. That'll happen sometime in the next couple of weeks. And then we'll be working with the Coast Guard on approving the vessel for service, and we'll be making sure to announce that and celebrate that as well. Of course, there'll be a big launch event planned in June when the vessel is ready to go, and there'll be more details to come on that. We're in the planning stages still for that event. It's docked right now, the sea change at Pier 9, and we'll look for some time to invite the board to come and take a tour of the vessel. There's some modifications that are happening right now, but it'll be ready to tour very soon. There's also been interest in holding private events on the vessel, so we're working on some of the details of how that would happen when after it's out of service, after 4 o'clock in the afternoon and evening hours. And already hearing some interest from employers about extending this demonstration project longer than the anticipated 6 months. Our lease that Blue and Gold holds with the vessel is for a 6-month duration, but there's options to extend it if there's funding available to keep it running. As a part of our system, we want to make this a real hallmark of the San Francisco waterfront, and it's something that people are excited to come and see and to ride. And if there's interest in keeping it around for longer than the initial demonstration period, we're certainly interested in doing that too. Also want to compliment Lauren Velarde on organizing the tour of the northern waterfront in Contra Costa. The Contra Costa Transportation Authority is conducting a ferry study to look at the establishment of ferry service, the potential for ferry service to Hercules, Martinez, Pittsburgh, or Antioch. Those cities are collaborating with TA on that study. It's probably going to take the full FY24 year to complete that study, but this tour was a great opportunity for us to see the sites that these cities are thinking about establishing ferry service firsthand, see the land uses that are planned, so the plans for the adjacent land uses that they have near the ferry terminals. And Bobby Winston, our friend Bobby Winston, and Eric Zelbold did a great job helping Lauren organize this tour. And thank you, Chair Wonderman, for coming out there and spending the day with us to meet with those stakeholders. We had about 20 or 30 stakeholders involved in that tour, and it was just a great way to build those relationships and to get those communities excited about the opportunity for ferry service in the future, and to keep them engaged in our business plan process, which is ultimately the arbiter of how we expand, where we expand, and when that happens. With that, Chair Wonderman, you have reports in your packet on financial statements, state and federal legislative updates, and our monthly ridership and recovery report. Happy to answer any questions or respond to comments from the board.
Thank you very much. And on the Northern Waterfront tour, it was really eye-opening to see the intense interest that these cities have in getting a terminal and getting service going. There are challenges in each case, and we provided some advice. And I thought it was a really good example of partnership, kind of emerging partnership opportunities. So, thanks, Lauren, for. I know it wasn't easy to get all those people in one place at one time, but you did it. So. That was really great. Very impressive. On the ridership report, so beside the data trails a little bit, is it seeing any very late changes?
The most recent changes that we have are all positive. So I expect next month's report will be even more good news. Our month of April shaped up to be one of the best months we've had during pandemic recovery. Our weekends continue to be strong. The AM commute is really continuing to pick up. And I know that in aggregate, downtown San Francisco office occupancy continues to be pretty flat. Director Moyer can probably tell us more about those details, but despite that happening and that plateau that may be happening, the ridership that we're seeing in the AM commute is continuing to grow. So it's unclear, I think, if we just haven't realized the new normal for downtown commutes, or if we have and we're just experiencing the same kind of growth that we were experiencing pre-pandemic, and we should have the expectation that growth will continue. When we get to our budget item, we'll talk a little bit about our ridership and revenue assumptions and what we think will happen over the course of the next fiscal year.
Great. Thank you very much. Any questions on any of the staff items? Go ahead, Director Moore.
Yeah, thank you. That was a great report and just overall, the sense in reading the entirety of the board packet and culminating in the budget is the incredible amount of work that is going on from the initiatives to the vessel replacement programs, the business plan, et cetera. It's in the time that I've been on the board, which is for Director Alba and I are coming up on, I think our 3rd anniversary. I'm doing the math right. It's just incredible to see how far everything has come in that short period of time. And so I want to just extend my admiration for all that is happening and seeing it come to fruition. I am especially gratified to see the sea change program, because I remember my very first meeting in this building on the concept of bringing a hydrogen ferry to the waterfront. It was so long ago, I don't remember how long ago it was, but it was a long time ago. And so to see this actually coming to fruition is for me personally just very gratifying. And I look forward to us continuing to move forward into a more sustainable program, whatever that may be. And in particular, just complete kudos on the achievement of getting to the milestone of 100 million in OPM, other people's money. So thank you very much for that. Really appreciate it. So kudos to all of our community for the accomplishment.
Directors, any comments or questions on any of the staff report items? Janice, maybe you could comment on the state of conversations around, future transportation, fiscal cliff funding, because I know you're involved in that, and like what's the latest thinking around that?
Yeah. We are participating in several venues, statewide and regional, that are dealing with the fiscal cliff issue that most other transit operators are facing. The most fare revenue dependent transit operators are at the front of the line in terms of fiscal cliff. You can count WETA among those before the freeing up of our refunds. So we're going to talk a lot about how fortunate we are. I'm sure in this meeting and several more meetings that RM3 is available to us. The biggest, most immediate impact of that is that we are able to use those revenues right away to balance our operating budgets, but other operators don't have that luxury. And our Caltrain, Golden Gate, and other fare revenue dependent agencies are desperate for the state to step in and provide some gap funding that would be available for the next few years until a potential regional ballot measure could be placed on the ballot in the Bay Area to provide ongoing sources of operating funding to allow those agencies to receive more subsidy than they have in the past. And I think that's the reality of the situation, is that the Bay Area has done such a good job depending on fares, generating high transit ridership, and now we're in a sense being punished for that, where other systems around the country who are not as fare dependent aren't and haven't relied on fares as much have been able to avoid the same kind of fiscal cliff issues because their revenue sources have held up. So there's some challenges in getting something approved statewide that would most immediately benefit just the Bay Area. Other operators in Southern California do have some fiscal cliff issues, but they aren't as dire as ours are. And so the immediacy of the need has been something that we've needed to communicate. Senator Scott Wiener is the champion on this issue in Sacramento and is helping to lead the charge. There's been a lot of attention focused on it, and we're at the point where we need to start talking about solutions. And the solutions that have been on the table that don't impact the general fund, of course, because we have over $25 billion deficit, and it's probably going to be more than that before we get to the point when our budget is approved. It's tough to find solutions without generating new revenues. So the MTC has approved a laundry list of revenue solutions that they would like to be on the table. So has the California Transit Association. Some of those overlap, some of those don't. Some of them depend on using some of the IIJA funds at the federal level. that would be surplus for other needs like highways and converting some of those surplus funds to be used on a one-time basis for transit. And that there are people who like that idea. There are people who don't like that idea. One of the more commonly supported ideas is using existing funds that would go towards capital projects and flexing those funds to be used for operating during the time that we're in to address this emergency. And for the Bay Area, one of the issues there is that those funds have been earmarked already for major capital projects like BART to San Jose, like the downtown extension to the Transbay Terminal, like Lake 21. And so using those for operating purposes in the near term means that we're taking a big step back on those already long lead time major projects that are desperately needed. That's where the conversation is now. And I think it's to be determined whether we end up with a solution that is just 1 year and need to pursue a similar solution next year for the region, or whether we get a multi-year solution that lets us pursue a regional ballot measure as a permanent fix for this issue.
Thank you. Certainly a really big issue for the Bay Area. I believe BART still uses a portion of its operating funds for capital. So there's still, they've been doing that for a long time.
Most transit agencies do that because they use it for state of good repair. And if they don't keep their system in a state of good repair, then they can't operate. So it's important that they.
It's just another way of saying that there's not enough capital funds available to do take care of the capital needs. Okay, any other questions or comments from the board of directors? Any member of the public have a question of Director Murphy and his team?
I should go ahead and reintroduce Pace Rowley, the person responsible for getting the sea change built. I think he did want to provide some public comment.
Thanks, Seamus. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. No, just quick comment. I was on board yesterday and in Seamus's office, and it's amazing how far we've come. WETA and Blue and Gold have been phenomenal partners in getting this. It's difficult getting the first of its kind into operation, and so we're getting very, very close and looking forward to the launch event and the next 6 months of demonstrating that this technology can work. And I hope that we can continue to partner and look at longer term potentially keeping the vessel in the Bay Area versus moving it out of San Francisco. But really looking forward to getting this operation. So thanks to Seamus and his team.
Congratulations, Pace. We know you worked really hard to get it to this place. So
thanks, Jim.
A lot of passion.
And you've been a big
prize.
champion of ours since the beginning. So very appreciated.
It's exciting to see. And, I think what Director Murphy said earlier about the pace of progress on zero emission ferries has been, nothing short of miraculous. When, not many years ago, we held hearings in this room where, the board was told we can't expect to have zero emission ferries. The technology is just not there. And now, we're well on the way, to have the first hydrogen vessel demonstrated and electric vessels. We have grants to actually develop them and infrastructure to support them. So it's really been an amazing, exciting venture. And, while the sea change, is first of its kind, it's not inconceivable that, the improvements that'll happen for hydrogen vessels will match what we've seen for, battery operated vehicles and, all of that. So, keep at it. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, hopefully it's the first of many.
Hope so. Any other public comments? Questions? Okay, if not, we'll move on to the consent calendar. So we have a rather unusually long consent calendar today with 11 items. So I think most of them are fairly, readily easy to understand, but there may be some items which either members of the board or members of the public might want to have them handled in public. So I'd like to pull item number C. Not that I have really any questions about it, but I think it's an important item that deserves a little bit of conversation. And any other items anyone would like to remove? Director Moyer.
Could we pull J for discussion, please?
Item J, please remove from consent calendar. Any other items removed from the consent calendar? Okay, hearing none, can we get a motion on the remaining items on the consent calendar minus item C and item J?
The motion to approve the rest of the consent.
Second.
Motion. Second, any discussion? Please call the roll.
Director Wonderman,
Yes.
Director Moyer,
Yes.
Director Alvin,
Yes.
Director Del Bono.
Yes.
Director Buell.
Yes.
Thank you. So for item C, I served on the Blue Ribbon Task Force, and if you read it, it's, this is basically a transfer of funds from us to MTC to implement portions of the plan. And my question is, it's a significant amount of money, and I'm totally supportive of doing it and understand it fully. If we're going to eventually have a regional transportation measure, we have to unequivocally demonstrate that the region is performing better and that the public can hope for a more efficient, reliable system in the future. Are other agencies also making these contributions, or how much funding is anticipated to be amalgamated for the purpose of delivering this?
Yeah, let me start, and Aaron may have clarifications or more to add, but other agencies are all proportionally contributing to this effort. It originally started with contributions from 2 agencies from MTC of federal COVID relief dollars. And when it became obvious that the total $85 million in COVID relief funds that would be set aside for this purpose would hamstring the region's ability to apply for supplemental COVID relief funding, that we would need to demonstrate that we spent the other COVID relief funding to be eligible for the supplemental COVID relief funding. The region said, let's go ahead and spend this COVID relief funding, spend it down so that we can get more and be competitive for that additional pot. And we'll, instead of COVID relief funding, we'll use some of the agency's STA funds to cover this $85 million effort. We're glad they did that because we competed for and successfully received $26 million in additional COVID relief funds. So that was a huge help to this agency, well worth the sacrifice of these STA funds. And I agree with you. We agree with you that if this is going towards really helpful, impactful efforts that will inspire a lot of confidence from the riding public that they should support more revenue for transit in the long term. The network management discussion is the outcome of that is funded through these funds. Fare integration efforts would be the recipient of some of these revenues. Mapping and wayfinding improvements around the region, all of the transformation action plan improvements that the public is really excited about would be initiated by this initial influx of $85 million.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. And what's the total amount of funding for, and
85.
85 million? To be able to get something done for 85 million, I guess. Hope so. Any other questions or comments on item 7C from the board? Yeah, go ahead.
Wanted to confirm that this is an appropriate use of SDA funds. There's no restriction.
No restrictions. The region, yeah, it's free to allocate these funds toward those purposes.
Good question. Any other directors on this one? Any members of the public wish to comment on 7C? Hearing and seeing none, I'll take a motion on 7C.
So moved.
Motion
Second.
and a second. Any further discussion? Please call the roll, Melanie.
Director Wonderman,
Yes.
Director Moyer,
Yes.
Director Alvin,
Yes.
Director Del Bono.
Yes.
Director Buell.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to 7J. Approve amendment number 1 to agreement number 21-028 with Pacific Power Group LLC.
Okay, great. Jeff Powell, Engineering and Maintenance Administrator. This item was approved back in January to do some work on these vessels. We combined a couple vessels in one contract, PPG. And what happened was there's some additional costs. And when we signed these contracts, we originally signed them up for open and inspect. Unfortunately, we don't know what we're going to find. We open them, inspect them. It's a sight unseen, so we're taking a guess. There is a little bit of contingency built in, but in these cases, there wasn't enough contingency built in. Some of the major costs that associated with, such as the Bay Breeze, was a new engine block, and some of the reports indicated that the engine block was inspected and found to be out of specification at the upper bores due to erosion, wear, and metal etching of the pan rail. And there was no guarantee that they could repair it, or if they could repair it, they would not be able to warranty it after the fact. In addition to that, there were some turbos, oil pumps, seawater pumps, and ejector cups that were found to be failed in that engine. And again, these are all items open, inspect, and sight unseen. For the Pyxis class engines, these engines are serial numbers 1 through 6. If we look at the whole Pyxis class engine, so the maintenance program is still being developed in that. So working with PPG, we came up with the best maintenance forward for 7, 8, and 10,000. Now keep in mind the 7, 8, and 10,000. It's not we do 7 or 8 or 10. They all three have to be done. And the goal was to move them all to the 10,000 hour mark. Some of the additional costs that came into play with that were changing out what they call the SCR cubes, because this is all to keep the engine Tier 4 compliant. And changing out the SCR cubes were some of the bigger costs involved with that class of engines. Basically where we're at with it, be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Director Moyer, you
Yeah.
fought for this one, so I'll turn it over to you.
That went right over my head. So this went up by 45%. That's why I wanted to flag it, which is a lot. I followed some of what you said, but I didn't follow all of it. So what I was hoping you could tell me is like, if I followed it correctly, so on the first item that you gave us, you had thought maybe, or well, when the bid was done, we thought maybe that there would just be kind of a tune-up repairs to the engine, but now the engine has to be replaced, or I didn't follow that.
So the
Like,
first one.
what is causing this to cost $500,000 more?
Okay, great question. So the original budget was actually 1.4 for this project. The PPG contract was issued at 1.2. So we always have some form of contingency in there. Unfortunately, this contingency went over. The total contract price of contingency was 1.4, and it went over about $295,000. So what that included is for an engine block change, it's not just the price of the block, it's also the price of the labor. It's more extensive, more labor intensive to change the block out, all the components out of the block and put it into a new block, dyno the engine, make sure it's all good and well and working. So that was part of one of the biggest costs. Another cost was the SCR cubes. Again, the Pyxis class engines are still in test. Well, they're coming out of test at 10,000 hours to get the Tier 4 certification requirements. So changing the cubes was.
Yeah, I got that part, but like, help me to understand. So let's take the engine first. So help me to understand on the engine, what had we thought was going to happen, and kind of give me a frame of reference of what that cost was. And then now that we've gone to this more intensive service with the added labor and the block itself, what's the change in cost? Like, I'm trying to understand, how do we get to what's $500,000 that it's the contract is going up by, that you're asking us to approve?
So originally we classify the repair work that we do these engines from PPG like a QL1, 2, and 3, and 4. Basically, just identifies a level of service that we do at those intervals. So we're basically, when we did the inspection on the engine, we took the engine out of the boat, we did the inspection on the engine, we found that the decking and everything could not be. So the cost associated with a new block is part of the material cost, and the labor to include it to take all the cranks and stuff out of the block and into a new block amounts up to a significant portion of that.
So if we hadn't had to do that, we wouldn't have incurred another. So that's causing us to incur another what, $250,000 of dollars of that $500,000, you think?
Probably about 2/3 of that.
Okay. And then on the Pyxis class, do you have a sense of what are they called?
The SCR cubes, I don't have that one actually broken down, but I can tell you the Pyxis class resulted in about 20% of the overall budget for that contract. And those SCR cubes are pretty expensive.
Okay. Okay. So on the face of it, it sounds pretty reasonable to me, but it would, in the future, would just really help to kind of have a little bit more of the math so that we wouldn't have to slow down and call you.
We'll work better to clarify a little better in the future.
Can I add something myself?
Good. Tim? Yeah.
I totally get not knowing until you pull it apart. I get all that. But what I'm just trying to do is the fiduciary work of understanding when it's such a big change.
Hi, good afternoon, Tim Hanners, Operations and Maintenance Manager. So one thing that we can provide if it's helpful, we have a complete breakdown of all the costs itemized with a justification of why we agreed with the cost increase because of the repair through a change order process and then an analysis we did. So Jeff wasn't prepared to share those details here now, but we can definitely provide that if that's helpful.
So I just, for a point of reference, the very next item was an excellent, like I followed that in my wee brain. That made sense to me and provided the transparency that I think in our role and public's role we'd want to see. And I think I followed everything that Jeff said, but a little slow on the map. Like it made sense to me. You wouldn't know until you got in there. That makes sense. But then I wanted to just understand, like, how do we go from here to here?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, on both of you. Any questions from directors on item 7J? Anyone from the public? Melanie, has anybody signed up on this? Okay, let's let's close the hearing on this one. So we need a motion on 7J. Jeff made a motion and we have a second. Any further? All right, please call the roll. Yes.
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 And thanks, Director, Vice Chair Moyer, for raising the issue. And, I think it would be good to follow up with a little more detailed analysis that Mr. Hanner said could be provided. I think would be just instructive, I think, for us because, so we just understand more from a process standpoint, how we get from here to here. These things happen. Item number 8, we're getting back to the fair policy. So item 8 is adopt the WETA fair policy and fiscal year 2024 through 2028 fair program. The action item.
Afternoon again. So this is an action item and we have a presentation on it.
You're gonna have to speak really loud.
Oh, okay. Action item requiring the board to approve the WETA fair policy and the fair program. Just to provide a quick update, the fair policy, which is attached with this board item, it is consistent with the core principles of pandemic recovery program. And it guides the multi-year fair program and also any future fair decisions. The fair program, the multi-year fair program, just to provide a quick recap, it was developed based on the fair policy and is designed to offset rising costs, keep in line with what other transit agencies in the region are doing, and also to provide fair predictability to our riders. In March, the board authorized to release the fair program to receive public input. During the public comment period, we received a lot of comments through various communication channels, email and social media. And as Seamus pointed out, the comments were mostly in favor of the program. So the first component of the fair program is is the fares for the regular services. So here's a snapshot of what it looks like for the 5-year. So as we can see, in terms of the fare structure, we made a slight revision, which I'll be walking through in the next slide. And the discount structure is of course consistent with what we had on the pandemic recovery program. So as the table shows, we see a small regular fare increase year over year to keep parity with other regional transit operators. So one of the few of the considerations that we had that we focused on for incentivizing paper tickets, for incentivizing electronic payments was to be in line with what other agencies are practicing, and also encouraging clipper usage, and also for efficient boarding process, which would result in better customer experience. Now, based on the feedback that we received from the board during March, we went back and looked at the paper ticket usage. And what we identified from recent and historic survey data was that a majority of our riders have access to smartphones and also purchase tickets through credit cards. So theoretically speaking, the riders do have the option of buying tickets through electronic media. However, there was a small percentage of low-income riders who purchase paper tickets. So in light of this data, what we're recommending is to keep the paper ticket fares same as the clipper and mobile fares. This also aligns with our goal of promoting equity and also appealing to a broader travel market as outlined in the fare policy. So the second component, just giving a quick recap, is the special event fares. In the past, we have done this, setting the fares for this special event fares separately. Going forward, we will be rolling it into the fare program. So as you can see, for the first fiscal year FY 2024, we are keeping it, it's a one-time adjustment to keep pace with costs, followed by a 3% annual increase year over year for the rest of the program life. So this wraps up the fare program. Upon board's approval, the program will be implemented in July 1st of this year. Thank you. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur.
Appreciate it very much. Could I just ask a couple things? In terms of the comments you received from the public, was there recognition of the fact that we had reduced the fares in this, for the, deal with the pandemic? Did they know? Or did they, they just look at it as, what is the charge and what's going to be the future charge?
Yes, I think it was looked at as a whole in terms of what the overall reduction in fares has been since the pandemic.
So they recognize that they're not paying as much. Is there any, when you mentioned the low income riders, some of these fares, even though we cut them, they're still, it's still an expensive trip for, I don't know, we're looking at the special event fares, which are more expensive, but it's still an expensive trip for somebody who's low income. Is there any consideration giving to having, special fares for low income?
Riders. So I think one of the things that we will be, we'll be doing is trying to partner with special events hosts to see if there is anything we could do from that perspective. And the other thing is also we'll upon implementation of this program, we'll be monitoring on a regular basis to see the performance, and the board always has the authority to change or modify.
Just in terms of transportation equity, you know, it's great that we've reduced the fares, but it's still, you know, a give or take, I think, when people decide whether to drive their car or, you know, use this form of public transit, because it's still, you know, it's still relatively, you know, it's a material amount of money to use the system. So, you know, I don't suggest we do anything different today, but if the technology and system capability is there in the future to be able to do something about that, I'd be interested in looking at it.
Just to add,
You have to go to the mic.
you know, I think the other opportunity to address the affordability issue is the Clipper Start program. And, you know, we thought that it was really important to acknowledge that program and our efforts to support it in the fare policy. That's part of the attachment. And WETA was actually one of the first agencies to pursue the program. We had a relatively high discount rate, 50%, some agencies have 20. And you'll recall, I think, a couple months ago, FTC presented to you. You gave them some strong feedback to say we'd like to see the program expanded potentially and continued. And we've been working at the staff level to really advocate for that. And you'll be seeing an action in June potentially. That'll be extending that program. And, you know, we'd like to see, you know, we recognize the same issue as you do. We'd like to see that program have a lower threshold of entry and an even more robust discount. We think it would benefit us, and then also have benefit of being something that's regionally implemented that would be familiar to transit riders in town.
Thank you. Okay, members of the board of directors, any comments, questions about the proposed fare program? Director Delbano.
No, I agree with the comments you made, and I also like what Mike had to say about the Clipper Start program. I do hope we monitor and Clipper monitors, like getting access to get people to be able to get Clipper cards, because that's part of the issue. You know, it's a lot easier to show up and buy a ticket than it is to figure out and, you know, navigate a system where you have to actually get a Clipper card, especially if you're, you know, not familiar, or, you know, you're not familiar with the system, or you can't afford to get into a system, or, you know, maybe you don't understand the system because, you know, you come from somewhere else and you're not, you know, familiar with how things work here. So I hope, like, part of that Clipper Start program is making sure people can access and obtain those cards. I personally came into this with heartburn of even raising the fare this first year, and you know, I thought about it a lot, and I had a good talk with Seamus about it. And one of the points that he made to me that stuck, I don't really care what everybody else does, because I think we have the best system, and I think if we have the money and it's supported, and we have the ridership, then we can do what we want with our fares. But one of the things he made a point of was that, you know, with RM3, if we go out and we don't raise our fares at some kind of level, you know, by the end of it, we're going to be 27% behind on what we could have obtained, and that would prevent running the service to other cities that we're looking to in the future. And one of the things that I'm, you know, looking at, and, you know, I will never leave San Francisco, and I love it, but you know, I hear from a lot of people that I grew up with that used to come to Union Square to go shopping, or want to come up here to go to dinner, that don't want to come here anymore, and they'll stay in their city on the peninsula or in the East Bay. And you know, I really feel like the ferry system's growth has a lot of potential to connect other cities with each other than San Francisco. You know, so I want to see that future growth happen. I want to see us get to Redwood City and Berkeley, and hopefully one day Hercules and Benicia, and, you know, as far as Pittsburgh and Antioch and those type of areas, because I think a lot of our ridership is going to come there, and we are a regional system. And you know, in San Francisco has been our focus, and I've always thought if we keep the ticket prices down, we can get people back to the city. And unfortunately, I think things are changing across the whole spectrum of the Bay. That I would rather, you know, put some effort and focus on growing our system, and, you know, even that making that connection from Marin to the East Bay, or to Vallejo to Marin and stuff like that. So I'm in support of the the fare increase, not because I think it's the best thing to do, but I think for where we're headed and what Seamus's points were to me about being able to grow the system and sustain growth to some of these new routes we're looking at. We need to do this. That's okay, but I don't want to lose focus on the Clipper Start program, or what Jim said, you know, getting access to, like, especially to special events. I don't think it's $20 is a lot to go to a special event, especially if you have a kid and you're, you know, to get in your car and like, or have to take BART versus get on a boat and go right there is like a missed opportunity for us to grow future riders that might not have access to it. So appreciate it. That's my rant today. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Director. Good, Director Ju.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I piggyback on a lot of Director Del Bono's comments. I do think this is striking a good balance between making it equitable for a lot of people to increase ridership, and at the same time, you know, trying to make sure that we're staying abreast of fare box recovery. I think it's great that we have in the fare policy about participating in the regional low-income fare discount program such as the First Start. I did think it would be nice to add, so I know that we're going to do with the special events fares, looking at how we can partner with the event venue on how they're offering discounts. I didn't see that in the comment in the bullet point on the fare policy, so maybe we can add something there. I did see in the actual breakdown that there is, you know, discounts for Clipper Start and whatnot, but on the special events, but still wanted to make sure that that was included in the fare policy. And then it was just interesting to me today, like having the paper tickets that were being purchased on the boat today, and how, you know, how we could perhaps, you know, because every single one of them, well, there's two that did not have their phones out, but the rest of them had their phones out and were like doing stuff on it. And the staff was saying, you know, $2 discounts if you use the app, and they just kept, you know, like not doing it. So I don't know what their reasons for doing that were, but you know, I was talking about perhaps doing a one-time discount if they download the app right then and you know, purchase their first ticket ever on the app. But perhaps, like Director Murphy was mentioning, that once we go to having everybody check in with their tickets in advance of getting on the boat, and those that are going to be purchasing paper tickets will have to wait before so they'll be the last ones to get their tickets, the last ones to board the boat. And they can be told at that time, if you download the app, you can get on right now, but otherwise you have to wait. And so maybe that would be enough of an incentive to get them to switch over to using the app. My thought.
Director Alba.
Just very, very quickly, I appreciate everything that you've done in regards to this the fare policy going forward, all of the work that went into listening to us and the community. I see all of the feedback that we discussed early on this year being incorporated. So I truly appreciate it. The paper ticket surcharge being gone, fantastic initiative. Didn't even cross my mind, but knowing how low-income riders to some extent depend on it, it's fantastic that we're doing it. Such a small portion of the revenue that I think it makes sense. And we know that some people are still resistant to downloading apps and using their credit or debit card on their phones and want to be able to use cash. And so I can understand that, but moving in the right direction, partnering strongly and influencing what will happen to the Clipper Start program, I absolutely love it. I'm hoping we can make that a permanent program in the Bay, and that we realize the benefits from having it, while also recognizing how limited it currently is in its reach. So all moving in the right direction. And I truly appreciate all of your hard work on synthesizing it into something that's so easily digestible.
Thank you. Good comment. Other members of the board? Comments on the fair policy? If not, let's have members of the public. Do we have a public hearing, so there's no further comments from the public? How's that work?
The public comment before was as part of the hearing. There should still be public comment on this.
We can
item.
still have public comment. So Melanie, has anyone signed up to comment? Anyone here in the room wish to comment? Seeing none, any of our virtual participants wish to comment? Okay, I'll close the hearing on item number 8 and call for a motion on the fair policy.
Here, Wonderman, I just didn't want to lose Director New's thought about adding a bullet to the fair policy that focuses on opportunities to provide a means-based discount for special event fairs. That isn't, she's right, that isn't mentioned in the
Okay,
bullets under special events. And so if you would like to tailor a motion
Yeah.
to make that addition, staff would be happy to add that.
we'll assume that Pippin, that you made that motion.
I make that motion. Thank you.
Okay, do you have a second on that
Second.
motion? And we have a second.
And just to clarify, please, there are actually two approvals that you're being asked to consider. One is to adopt the fair policy, which is an independent document, and the other is to adopt the 5-year fair program. So just to clarify for the record, whether this motion was focused on both or one.
Both.
On both. So we're going to take both items at the same time on item number 8, correct?
That's okay. Go for it. Yep.
Okay, any further public comment on the amendment? If not, let's call the roll on it. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Thanks for pointing that out, James. Item number 9, approved contract award to Kimley Horn and Associates, Inc. for Vallejo Ferry Terminal Reconfiguration Project, Environmental Review and Permitting Services.
Again,
They're
this.
working you hard today.
So before getting to the item, I just wanted to point out an error in the fiscal impact section. It says an additional 38,000, it should be $80,000. The contract amount is not to exceed $60,000. Just wanted to mention that. So this is again an action item requiring the board to approve contract award for Kinley Horn for providing environmental and permitting services for the Vallejo Reconfiguration Project. So just a quick background on the project. It entails analysis of the reconfiguring the location of the terminal in order to reduce or even eliminate the need for regular maintenance dredging. So as to support this project, WETA released an RFP to provide environmental and permitting services. And as part of the, after the issuance of the RFP, we received 3 proposals, and we found all the 3 proposals to be competitive. We conducted interviews with each of the proposers, and after the interviews, the evaluation committee evaluated and found that Kimley Horn scored the highest of all the 3 proposals. The proposal from Kimley Horn was particularly comprehensive. They had provided detailed project understanding and approach, and also they presented how WETA would benefit from their experience. For example, on their extensive approach on public outreach process. It is also worth noting that the project team has 16% SBE participation. The project team, including sub-consultants, have worked with WETA in the past. With that, I will wrap up here and answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any questions. That's a good presentation. The scores are close, and it's good that of the 3 proposers, they were all deemed to be competitive. So that's good. I guess, yeah, we could move the screen to. something more apropos to the moment. Any questions from members of the board on this item number 9? Any members of the public? Go ahead, Director Alba, go ahead.
Could you, thank you, Marty. The additional, what was the amount, the fiscal edition?
It should be 18,000.
18.
It says 38.
Okay, great, okay. And then, so I understand that they have a high SBE goal or SB inclusion, participation, but no DBE. And so do you want to talk a little bit about that? Would it have helped if they also had DBE participation on this project?
I'll just mention that there is very limited number of DBE firms with this specialization. We did have networking events as part of the pre-proposal conference. Apart from that, I'm defer to parents to add more.
We reviewed all of the proposers, DD and SDE participation. Of our top choices, none of the bidders had DDE participation. They did explain in detail their search for participation for DDEs. We found it to be cognate. However, this is again another case of the type of work that is being done without a large pool of DEs available in that kind of work. So this is another point.
So it's the maritime adjacency that is making it harder to find DBE participation.
Yeah, in particular, the construction part of it, because there aren't a lot of DBEs in that field. And as you know, we did a workshop to find out why, there's a lot of certifications and barriers that prevent DBEs from being able to participate in this kind of work, especially with this particular kind of contract. There already aren't a lot of them, and even if they wanted to get into it, it would take a lot of resources and time in order to get them into it.
Right. Okay, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, comments from members of the board? Members of the public on item 9, Melanie? Anyone here wish to comment on this item or in the virtual world before we close the public hearing? Okay, hearing none, where is this firm located? Where is it? Is it a Bay Area firm or is it?
I believe, yeah, Oakland. is
Oh.
the main office.
So, we mentioned, I guess we being me, a number of times, the need to gear up our maritime, capabilities in the Bay Area. And I think, from a training, there's an opportunity here to not keep having the same conversation, which we keep having, that there's nobody available. So that's a similar problem to we can't do zero emission ferries. So we could do zero emission ferries, so we can do DBEs, but we're going to have to work at it. So, we really need to double down on this. And I think it can be part of a bigger, it's not just about DBEs, it's about workers and it's about, who we are as a place. And, part of the problem with the Bay Area's economy is we really, a lot of regions in the world would really, be foaming at the mouth to have what we have in terms of technology, but we've lost our edge when it comes to manufacturing and industry and maritime. And, we have a role in this and we happen to have some leverage because of regional measure 3 and the capital investment that's coming. So I know we can't solve this today, but as we're thinking going forward, maybe, as part of the business plan, and I know Bobby Winston is working hard on this outside the auspices of WETA. We should really be thinking about, strategically about growing this industry here. It's not going to solve all our problems, but it would really help, I think. So I shall leave it at that and take a motion unless there's other comments.
So moved.
Take a motion in a second. Please call a roll. Yes.
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 All righty then. So item number 10, award contracts for on-call pilot and emergency ferry services and operations to Prop SF LLC and Blue and Gold Fleet LP.
Thank you, Chair Kevin Conley, Manager of Planning and Development at WETA. As you just summarized, staff is recommending awarding on-call contracts for both pilot services and emergency response services to Prop SF and Blue and Gold Fleet. We experienced 5 different firms that expressed interest in the procurement. Only 2 submitted proposals, which was not unforeseen, and they both submitted very complete, thorough proposals, and staff has scored them very highly. And we look forward to working with them in many opportunities over the 5 years this contract will represent. That I can take any questions.
Thank you very much. When you say not unforeseen, why would, 5, I think it was 5 firms show interest and 2 firms put in a proposal? A bid.
Well, I mean, number one, there's just a issue of universe. The universe is not that big to begin with in terms of qualified firms that would be capable of competing for this. So you're really down to a limited pool that are out there eligible of maybe 7. And of those, many of them chose not to put in the work necessary for the RFP. And we heard various reasons why. In some cases, we heard no reasons why. But that's what we were left with.
Hey, Wonderman, I have a little bit of a different take on it. I was a little surprised that we only received 2 proposals,
Yeah,
mostly because I've heard just so much about how the private operators have been banging on our door saying they want to do business with WETA. And this is the path that we created for them to do business with WETA. And so I expected we would get more attention on this than we did. I don't think it's a bad thing that we didn't get as many proposers in this case. I think the proposals that we did get are sufficient to be able to accomplish the goals that we want to accomplish with a program like this over the duration of the contract. And I think that when we do, we will create a situation where we have more attention the next time we go out and do something like this. And hopefully we do generate more interest from the operators that are eligible and qualified to work with us. And I think part of it also has to do with just the economic environment that we're in. There's a lot of question marks around the survival of services that have, maybe been more financially secure previously than they are now. And so that is probably another factor that plays into this. But we look forward to doing good work with the 2 firms that are proposed to receive contracts through this item.
thanks for providing that context. Members of the board, Director.
Yeah, just to tag on what we said, I think we've talked about this for a while, and I think the standard was put out there that we were looking for companies that wanted to do business with WETA that, play ball like our good partners Blue and Gold have, that set a standard of treating their employees right, their customers right, paying a good wage, carrying the proper insurance and stuff. So I know Prop SF's been out there doing it too. So I know they've made a big effort in meeting what we've decided that we wanted to set a boundary of a standard as, and they've stepped up and come out and come to the table and have worked with us, labor, providing a service out there. So Blue and Gold is set that standard, and I think Prop SF's there to do it. And I think maybe some of these other agencies that want to next time take a look at it, look to Blue and Gold and Prop SF and try to meet that standard and be competitive in the process. So that's how we've talked about this a long time. So good job. I'm getting it out there the right way. And Kevin, yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Agree. Good. Director Duke.
Yeah, I just had a question on, like, what those pilot and emergency services, have we already like determined what those are gonna be? Or is there gonna be a time where we are going to dive further into what those pilot and emergency services will be, or is that already?
If Kevin, what you got?
Well, for sure, we know one, a pilot service, and I'll keep you on the edge of your seat. You'll be seeing that on June 5th. Beyond that, it could be anything, honestly, and that's why we created the structure that we did here, which is to allow for a 5-year list, and who knows what it will be into the future. But we definitely saw a need, like we're going to come back to you with in June. On the emergency services part, it honestly could be anything under the sun. And the purpose here was something that the staff has wanted to do for quite a while, which was basically just to accelerate the possibility of contracting in the instance of an emergency, so we can call on somebody and have all of the information ready and be ready to do it. So that in that case, we wanted the most flexibility we could as a staff.
And so will we be having like a study session on future potential pilot programs and like where we see potential need for emergency ferry services?
So in terms of the pilot, and these are two different things, and we created two different lists for this reason. In terms of the pilot, we committed to coming back to you as a board to approve the contracts for the pilots. The sort of brainstorming about future pilots and where they could be would be part of the business plan process. And so within that forum, that would be the perfect opportunity to do that. In terms of emergency services, that's also part of the business plan. So we have a component of the business plan that will look at how we handle emergency services. We've already done some work on that in terms of sharing with the board to really, and we did that at 2 meetings ago to kind of confirm our general direction that we're going. But really the intent of our emergency services here is really in case of emergency, call up list type of function.
Yeah.
So it's not to preordain or anticipate what we're doing. It's just to have this flexibility if something happens and we have to respond quickly.
Yeah. Well, and the reason I ask is because so I'm newer to the board and, I just heard 2 weeks ago about the STA was considering ferry service from Vallejo to San Rafael. I had actually asked Senator Dodd about that a long time ago, and he was saying that he didn't think it was feasible. And so I didn't know there was further conversations around it. And then I met with the mayor of Suisun City, and she was talking about the need for, in an emergency, how they are really stuck in their city without water emergency access. And so that was just like a month ago or so. And so I just wanted to make sure that as I'm hearing more requests for needs that, and like the city council in Vallejo was expressing a desire to have a pilot, or not a pilot, but service from San Francisco in the evening to Vallejo. And so just wanting to see how I can make sure that those are included as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Other comments, questions from directors on item number 10? Okay, hearing none. Melanie, has anyone signed up on item 10?
No.
Would anyone who's here like to comment on item 10, Mr. Estrada?
Robert Estrada, I'm the regional director of, should I go up here? I thought that was only for in-house.
All for you.
Robert Estrada, I'm the regional director for the Inland Boatmen's Union. We represent the deckhands on the WETA boats. And I just wanted to say that, in a situation like this, developing into new territory with what you're doing here, it presents a lot of inherent opportunity for concern and apprehension on labor's part. Blue and Gold Fleet, top-notch employer, Prop SF, they've signed on to our benefits and wages, and we're really developing a good relationship with them. So as far as how it landed, couldn't be happier. Really, what I want to kind of say here is I want to give credit to Executive Director Seamus Murphy for involving labor along the way, because that can help mitigate some of those inherent concerns that are bound to develop. And, it's a lot easier to say, no, 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 when something is unknown. And the active calls and discussions that Director Murphy invited me into really went a long way. And, along those lines, Director Murphy and Tim Hanners, they went up to LaConner, Washington to see vessels being constructed recently. They invited me to come along and to also see those vessels. That gave opportunity for extensive discussions on some of the plans that are coming out. That kind of at the roots communication really has opportunity to pay dividends from my perspective. And I just really want to give credit where that's due. And, where we landed here with these two employers, great. And I just hope that it's a model for the communication and what to expect going forward. So thank you. And, answering some of our concerns all along the way on that. So.
Great. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Other members of the public signed up on this item? Would anyone like to make a comment here in the audience? Anyone in the virtual audience like to comment? Okay, let's close the hearing on item number 10 and take a motion.
I'll move.
Make a
Second.
motion and a second. Call roll, please. Yes.
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 Yeah.
Item number 11. Draft final WETA zero emissions plan. I have a feeling this actually won't be the final, but for the moment, it's the final. So let's talk about it.
Thank you, Chair Wonderman and Board of Directors. I'm Chad Mason, Senior Planner, Project Manager with WETA, and I'm Tim Hanners, WETA Operations and Maintenance Manager. Today, Tim and I are going to present an update on WETA's zero emission plan as we concluded the CEC blueprint process and we move towards implementation. This is a 2-year effort. This is our best attempt to consolidate that information into a brief presentation without taking up the whole afternoon. So here we go. And we'd also like to thank our consultants that helped us in this effort, Arup and Aurora Marine Design, who were instrumental in helping us get this done.
And our new team member, LiftTech.
So the CEC blueprint developed the CEC process developed a much needed blueprint for WETA's transition to zero emission technology. Until now, the agency had no plans in place for a zero emission future. It's important to note that the phasing plans presented and created as in the blueprint were developed when we didn't have regional measure 3 and we had other uncertainty of funding. As we know, we've heard several times in this meeting, that's coming together with TRCP and other grant funds, and the regional measure 3, we have some resolution on that as well. So the phasing was theoretical for the most part, and right now things are rapidly evolving and changing, and this presentation might not even be up to date with the current plans as of today. So I received word of that before the presentation this morning.
You didn't have to give that away. It seems you can tell.
The information in the blueprint is also instrumental in helping us win this most recent TRCP grant award. It was really the foundation of what we put into that project. And the work product that we get out of this is going to help us continue to use that to put future applications together and hopefully be successful. This slide, the objective for the blueprint process was to develop a plan to transition to a zero emissions future. And to meet that objective, we asked and answered the following questions. How much power do we need? Where will it come from? When do we need it? How much will it cost? And how do we pay for it? This slide illustrates the alignment with the climate goals for representative routes of Treasure Island, Oakland, Alameda. And you can see WETA will emit significantly less greenhouse gases with an electrified system as compared to diesel and R99. And I'll let Tim give a little update on R99.
We started using R99 in about 70% of our fleet approximately 2 years ago. we just got approval from the EPA and MTU for our test engines, our M2 test engines on the Pyxis class to go ahead and start using R99. So within the next 2 weeks, on the 15th, we'll be using 100% R99 across our fleet. So that's a good milestone for us and important step in just reducing overall emissions.
Can we ask quick questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the red bars will no longer be, it's fantastic to see that how we're moving in the right direction. It's the blue bars where we're going to be in a few weeks.
Yeah, and this chart doesn't represent like what we're producing as emissions, but yeah, like
Right.
because even right now we're about 70% of our fleet is on R99.
Yeah.
But yeah, within the next couple of weeks, as we phase the R99 into the Vallejo fleet, that will it will lower drastically.
Fantastic.
Stakeholder engagement was a very important part of the process so far, and will continue to be an important part of our process as we move forward. This slide illustrates the stakeholders engaged to date. Importantly, we have CARB up front with heads the new regulations that we started looking at this before the blueprint effort, and then we have the CEC grant, which funded the CEC blueprint process and gets us to where we are today. Here we have an illustration of the workflow. Stage one was baselining and data collection, and this was really to better understand all the variables that go into WETA's implementation and decisions and strategy. Stage two was optioneering, where we utilized the data from the first phase to develop solutions for technology, infrastructure, and operating parameters. Stage three synthesized all of the effort from the first two stages into an actionable plan to deliver electrified ferry service. This slide shows the estimated daily use of our terminals in 2025, 2030, and 2035. Downtown terminal in 2035 is estimated to use approximately 80 megawatt hours, and that's the duration. That's how much we use in one day. Origin terminals are estimated to use between 10 and 30 megawatt hours in 2035. And for context, the typical single-family house uses 0.03 megawatt hours per day. SF Central Library uses 22 megawatt hours per day, and SF General Hospital uses 374 per day. As I mentioned in the beginning, things are evolving quickly and changing every day. So this is an example of it. You'll see there's no estimate there for Alameda Main Street. When we first started getting into this, we were going to do all of our charging at Oakland and downtown. And working with Alameda Municipal Power, we realized there's a good opportunity to electrify Alameda Main Street, but a relatively cost-effective approach to do that and deliver that. So it could substantially reduce the demand at Oakland or eliminate it. That's something that we're going to be looking at as we move forward. And that Alameda Main Street electrification, the shoreside infrastructure, was included as part of the TRCP project. This next slide shows the primary strategy for enhanced connections at the terminals. And you can see the red bar represents the peak power demand, and the blue bar represents the peak power demand with implementation of battery electric systems at the terminals. So it really helps, the batteries help alleviate the peak demands and allows us to most efficiently charge those batteries when the electricity costs are less expensive, and that increases the feasibility and substantially lowers the cost. This shows the illustration of the proposed strategy, the current conditions. Every single one of our terminals will need an extension to the local grid. There's none of the existing grid can meet that future demand. So as we move into the electrified condition, as Tim will get into with the vessel electrification program, really initiates that. Then we have grid upgrades and the battery electric systems, and then load management to help us manage the electric usage at the terminals and on the vessels. The phasing largely depends on funding, the readiness of project and our local partners, cost and complexity of extending the local grid, and the feasibility of the current vessel technology to provide attractive services. This slide represents the theoretical phasing that we developed as a baseline. As we know, the downtown San Francisco terminal requires the most significant upgrades. WETA is actively engaged with the SFPUC and the port to move this project forward. The effort was bolstered when WETA submitted an application to SFPUC for this enhanced service. The port is also working on their own project, which we're a part of, to enhance the electrical capacity along the entire northeast waterfront from the Bay Bridge, a little bit south of the Bay Bridge right now, north. They're looking at the entire waterfront. We're part of that northern component, and we would be one of the first new customers to connect to that enhanced infrastructure in the Embarcadero. We also have submitted preliminary engineering applications to Alameda Municipal Power, and we've had a lot of upfront coordination and discussions with them to see what it takes to extend the grid to those facilities. This slide represents the timeline to electrify and the costs to do that electrification. It also identifies the utility providers and our most important stakeholders. This slide also includes the Central Bay Maintenance Facility, electrification and expansion of that facility. And this upgrade is critical to provide enough space for WETA to maintain, charge, and lay over the new electric vessels that we will be building. That project was also part of the recent TIRCP grant award for the name of that project is the San Francisco Alameda Oakland Rapid Electric Emission Free Ferry Project. So that included $6.4 million for the Central Bay project, shoreside infrastructure, $4.8 million for the downtown terminal electrification, and $2.6 million for the Main Street terminal. So, and we had a previous TIRCP grant award that included funds for vessels and infrastructure at Mission Bay and Treasure Island. So that concludes the shoreside infrastructure component. I'll turn it over to Tim.
Thanks, Chad. Hello, everyone again. Yeah, I'd like to take this time, take this moment again to just acknowledge, we get the benefit of standing up here and giving you guys an overview. We have some of the best naval architects and engineers in the world working on this and guiding us. So lots of thanks, and to our legal team. Lots of thanks to Aurora Marine Design, Elliott Bay, AREP, and our newest partner, Lift Tech, who's helping us design the new floats that we're going to be installing. So I just wanted to acknowledge them before we get started. Once again, Chad spoke to this briefly. I'll speak a little bit on the vessel side and what we're doing. As Chad mentioned, we have $15 million of TRCP money that we were awarded through the first grant that is going to take care of the infrastructure needed for phase one. Phase one does not require additional power being brought in. We could accomplish what we want to do for Treasure Island, Mission Bay, and downtown San Francisco by running the small vessels and installing batteries into the floats at those locations. Phase two does require additional power to be brought in that we are all confident we can make happen with some additional funding and what we have in place now. We think the technology is readily available to run those services with battery electric vessels. And phase 3 and 4, while they're a little farther out, things like demonstrating the hydrogen boat will kind of guide us and let us know, what future technology is going to emerge to let us do routes like Vallejo, future Redwood City, or some of the other longer routes that we want to accomplish as an agency. Is there any questions with some of the phasing, or I know we're kind of going pretty fast with what we're doing. We'll kind of break down what boats we're building and what steps we're taking towards the end, and hopefully that'll help. We're currently designing a float to install at the downtown ferry terminal. This float ideally will be installed at all of our locations in phase 2. Oakland, Seaplane, the 3 floats at downtown San Francisco. And what we're trying to accomplish is installing the majority of the equipment inside of the float. So removing the ballast, the water, and installing batteries and equipment up to 4 megawatts of power. This gives us a ton of advantages. One being rapid charging, so that the boats don't have to sit for hours at a time or overnight to be able to get to that demand for the next run. And also to be able to charge during off-peak hours, so the rates are lower. as Chad mentioned, this is in development, but this is, an optimal and a conservative implementation schedule on the vessel side. And it shows us converting from diesel to electric. For future technologies, we're studying them. We don't know which one is going to take over. Maybe it's hydrogen, maybe it's alternative fuels. We're learning and listening and hoping, that one of those technologies emerges and allows us to accomplish those goals of our phase 3 and 4. This slide represents some of the vessels that we currently have funding for, or that we plan to repower in the near future. The first two that you see here are the replacements of the Antinley and Mare Island. Those are funded by FTA funds. And we plan on going out with an RFP within the next 3 months to start construction of those vessels. We anticipate those vessels being around 300 passengers, all battery electric. As part of the TIRCP grant that we got, the first grant that we were awarded, we were able to fund 2 smaller electric boats. We're shooting for a 149 passenger vessel. And the third 149 passenger vessel is funded by the FTA. Those boats will be able to serve a future Treasure Island route, Mission Bay, any waterfront service, and also some of the Oakland Alameda runs. There's lots of opportunities for Kevin to dream up all kinds of ideas for us to go through, where we can put some of these smaller electric boats in midday service in Oakland Alameda to offset costs and increase our service. We also think the Hydros class is a viable vessel to convert because they were built fairly recently. So we're currently working on a revised estimate now. We don't have funding yet in place, but I know Aaron's actively working on it to convert those 4 vessels. So that's kind of what's in front of us right now and what we're working on. Any questions with vessels?
Yeah, on the charging. So on the slide with the float. So is the idea to be able to kind of come in and, not necessarily fully charged, but enough to make it to the next place and then charge it so you can move them in and out quickly? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so we're shooting for like a 5 to 8 minute dwell time where the boat's tied up, and we would do a rapid charge anywhere from 1 to 4 charging cords. And the other thing that allows us to do is extend the life of the battery. The more you drain the battery down, the less life you get out of it. So trying to keep that topped off. And so every stop, you try to charge as much as you can.
Is it automated, or are there connections that need to get made, or or do you not know yet? How does that work?
We're studying it, and we have a lot of people working on it. We're working. We're going to be working on this soon together. Right now, we're leaning towards manual plugs, similar to like what Tesla has. Lightweight, they're water cooled. The biggest concern with charging is the crew. One, safety. Yeah, and the wear and tear of the crew having to do this multiple times a day. So that's a huge concern of ours. There are automatic options out there, and we're looking into them. They're very complex and require a lot of maintenance, and they're very expensive. And so right now we're leaning towards the manual solution, but we haven't made the decision. We're still looking into it.
Thank you.
And the floats are already in place, or would there need to be additional floats in certain locations?
So the first float that we build with the TIRCP money is going to be new, so that we don't disrupt service, so that when that float is done, we can put that into downtown without a huge disruption of service. We have done a great job in the past of trying to have standardized float. We have that in certain places, but not all. Oakland is one area where this float at EF and G would not fit, so we'd have to make some modifications to that. But the newer floats and terminals that we've built are the same, where this new float that we built can be plugged in.
And on the automated, so like Soul Trans has induction chargers.
Mhm.
So is that like one of the systems you were talking about is more expensive and just
Yeah, more, and it's a lot of weight too. I mean, that's the other thing we have to look at, but we haven't ruled anything out. We're still looking at everything, but inductive charging is also something we're looking into.
And then the vessels you showed, so we have new ferries, new vessels on half of the list, and then the Hydro's fleet being converted to electric.
Yeah, so 5 new electric ferries.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Crazy. It just happened with a lot of work. Yeah.
Did Seamus or Chad make you wear that jacket?
No, they didn't. I don't know if they dressed themselves.
Question, other comments, questions? So there's a lot to take in.
He's not done.
Terminal electricity consumption. This was a study that ARIP did this study that shows the comparison between diesel cost to electric, and we are seeing there's a lot more work to do in this area to analyze what the cost of diesel versus electric is. But it is promising, and it shows that the overall cost of having an electric fleet and paying for electricity is lower than diesel.
But not a huge difference.
We do anticipate the maintenance costs and capital costs to be reduced. We don't know how much. We know at least 30%. And that's part of the study that's ongoing that we're looking into.
And so this is just based on the tariffs, that like the electricity tariffs, not capital cost baked in with.
That's part of it. This was developed using a model that Arab specializes in, and there's a lot of inputs. We could provide more information
Okay.
later. And we definitely considered tariffs. We're part of that. The other way to look at this too is it's a hard to quantify benefit, put a cost to, but the tremendous benefits of no more carbon emissions and the regular emissions from diesel that we've put a lot of effort into dealing with to date with the tier 4 and getting us to that point.
I mean, the comparison to a Tesla or electric vehicle, I think the assumption is about a third of the cost, something like that, of filling it up with gas. So marginal versus a third is a big difference,
Yeah.
right? So I would just be interested in having this be further verified before we say it's final. I would assume that the savings would be higher, but maybe it is because of the peak demand that we would be purchasing at the worst case, and also using a lot of peak demand when the tariff is the highest.
Yeah, and why the CEC grant is closing, we're still continuing to form and do our study. One thing that we're working on now is developing a powertrain that's all electric. And comparing that to our diesel boats, to like the Hydros class. And so we're still working while the CEC grant is closing down. Our study is still ongoing.
Great.
And Chad, you want to close us out?
Sure. Okay, implementation. As we've pointed out several times already, we have about $94 million secured already between the TIRCP and some federal vessel funds. And it started in the beginning. We have a really good baseline to pursue more grants there. We're seeing more grant opportunities come forward. We're going to continue to pursue the TIRCP, and hopefully we'll go after some federal grants as well. You're going to see this come back several times this year in different forms. It'll be built into the WETA business plan. It'll be also part of the Regional Measure 3 5-year plan. Kevin will be presenting that next month. And we're not going to take any big actions without bringing it back to the board for review and consideration. And then the ongoing work program that's happening right now is the downtown SFPUC coordination that I mentioned is ongoing. we have a really good relationship with Alameda Municipal Power, and they're really ready to jump in when we are. We do have the benefit in Alameda that the context there is less complicated than we have in downtown San Francisco. So downtown is going to be the really challenging project to deliver that shoreside infrastructure. And Tim's vessel construction and continued work on the floats and the battery and the charging systems. That concludes the presentation. If there's any more questions.
There's a lot to unpack there. Comments, questions from the board?
I do have a couple of, so for San Francisco, where we have, is it 4 landings or 4?
Three gates.
3 gates. So you would have a float for each gate, one's fully electrified or like two floats?
So Tim's float that he provided the overview of will be the first new one, and that we build that so we don't disrupt service. It plugs into one of the gates first, whichever one we determine is best, least disruptive, goes into E, for example. E goes out, gets retrofitted
Okay.
to be similar to that float. That E is an older float. F and G are newer. That might be a little easier to retrofit. We'll figure that out when we get into it. And then the first float will plug in, and then it could plug in elsewhere that we have that capability to just plug it in.
You can land 2 vessels on that float, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So each gate has 2.
And we're-
Yeah.
Right.
I
And
meant-
we're trying to be able to charge on both sides also.
And then just 2 bigger things. One is regarding resilience with future brownout, power shutoffs, safety power shutoffs. And so just from a resilience perspective, that we're keeping that in mind, that electricity may not always flow at every location, and how that might interrupt operations at that time. And then the other question is regarding future battery, the range of batteries, and also capacity, right? So that right now we see this massive change in how we fuel our cars, right? And so we're implementing charging stations and thinking about the national network. But with things changing or battery technology advancing at such a rapid pace, that we're just keeping in mind that technology is changing incredibly rapidly right now, that we're not overestimating the costs, the peak demand, but rather saying this is conservative under 2023 conditions. In 2025 conditions, we might have a completely different picture because technology is so rapidly evolving. The batteries that we do install might have bigger capacity and may need less power, rapid power charging in San Francisco, for instance. Just something for us to keep in mind. So cities now are, over the next 5 to 10 years, they want to have tens of thousands new charging stations across both at the residential, at the employer, and in public locations. But with technology changing so rapidly, if we look 5 years from now, we may not need all of that infrastructure. So we're not oversupplying, but rather taking it, this is a conservative 2023 estimate. It may very well change by 2025. So that we're constantly keeping on top of these advancements in technology.
Absolutely. There's a huge debate with the engineering team right now. Should we go with a 5-year battery or a 10-year battery on the vessels? And with technology increasing as fast as it is, it does make sense to maybe go with a 5-year battery. So one of the things we're looking at too, because recycling is such a, something that we should be looking at also is, so those batteries might not be able to work on the vessel to get us through the routes we need to get, but can we then put those in the float, for storage? So we are thinking through some of those things, but it's a good reminder, and thank you.
I can add to that too. We're doing our best to stay nimble, and I think when we work with Mike to wrap these details up in the business plan, we can lay some framework out where we are able to do that. And that model that showed the comparison of electric to diesel, that's a snapshot using a complicated model of today into the future, but it's based on what we know today. We know diesel is extremely volatile. So, and everyone also going the route of electrification, as you mentioned, we're not the only ones. So what's going to happen with the cost of electricity? I know my electric bill's gotten a lot more expensive
Yes.
over the last year. So we're going to keep tracking that and do the best we can to stay on top of it and be flexible. And the emergency response component, that's definitely something that we are going to continue to study. Batteries give us some resilience on that. And also, if you look at our fleet plan, we are going to have diesel vessels around for the foreseeable future. We may start phasing some out, but we'll have to react and adjust and know what our resources are to respond.
And that's part of the continuing study that we're doing is the emergency response aspect of it. We have some ideas about having like a gas turbine on the boat that you know that's maybe stationed shoreside, and then in case of emergency, you can deploy it on the boat, or having a power barge, you know, that can be powered by diesel. And so that's something that we will bring back to the board to update on, and that we need to look further into.
Ms. Gallardi, I think you wanted to
Just wanted to add one.
add something.
California Transit Association is working on a bill right now, AB 463, which prioritizes transit's use of power during a brownout or a blackout. So in addition to what we're doing here in the study and our plans, there's also another effort on the other side to help make sure that transit has power.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, did you have any more questions, Director Alba?
No.
Director
Just
Ju?
a
Yeah.
brief comment that I applaud the team. Kudos for doing all of this. It's super exciting. I just want to break out an applause every time I see that grant number awarded. That's really exciting. And I can't wait for the day when Vallejo is on the list of people.
Electric. Other comments from the board?
We might be able to do it, but it would take 5 hours to get to the city.
Right, yes.
When you're having fun on a great ferry ride, who cares how long it takes? Members of the public, Melanie signed up on this item. And we have Kelly on our virtual world signed up for a question.
Thank you. I'd just like to make a comment. You know, on the one hand, it's very nice to be talking about electric vehicles, and that hopefully this will help us with climate. It doesn't help us with biodiversity, unfortunately. But I would suggest that you look at the Washington Post from April 27th, and that's the underbelly of electric vehicles is the title of the article. And this article is about where the minerals come from to make the batteries. And it's really quite sobering when we think about the damage that we do to get these minerals. You know, it seems like we have to get rid of diesel, but there's nothing that doesn't create other damage as well. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the point. Yep. Good point. Other members of the public wish to comment on this information item number 11?
Here, wondering before we wrap up, if I just could add my compliments to Tim and Chad for this work. Nobody else is doing this. This is, you know, groundbreaking, not just in the US, but around the world. We've seen lots of electric ferries, hybrid ferries, hydrogen ferries in operation around the world, but none of them are going to be as good as these vessels and be charged with the kind of infrastructure that we're looking at and putting in. So when we do finish some of this work and have these vessels delivered, they'll be the best in the world. I think we're competing with Auckland right now to see who's first, and they're probably going to be a little bit ahead of us, but I'm confident our vessels are going to be better from a speed standpoint and just overall their charging characteristics. But there's just a lot of unknowns when you're first with something. So appreciate the board and the public bearing with us while we figure some of this out. And on the point about batteries that Kelly made, I think it's a great point. You'll remember our report that we received from the Beacon Group went into some detail about what the most what battery choices would have the least impact from a human rights standpoint and a mineral availability and sustainability standpoint. So we have that as a resource when we get to the point when we make a selection on battery type.
Great, thank you. Pace, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll keep it brief, but as Switch Maritime is the developer of the hydrogen ferry, we're not necessarily just trying to push hydrogen. Our objective is just getting zero emissions vessels to be adopted. Battery electric, we're very supportive of, and as well as hydrogen and other fuel types that may come into the solution. I speculate, one of the issues, I used to work at PG&E, and I speculate that infrastructure, I've been looking at this in other markets beyond San Francisco, that the charging infrastructure is going to be really good up to a certain phase, and then it gets to a size where it can get really, really cumbersome and with the demand charges and such. And I do, again, speculate that a fuel like hydrogen, that's still an electric vessel. We're just putting hydrogen on board to create the electricity. It's the same electric motors, but you can essentially fuel the ferry the same way you would with diesel. It takes about the same amount of time, and you do it overnight. You don't need to charge. So I think it's a really impressive plan. I wonder if some of those longer routes are going to be served with something like hydrogen versus the battery, but really, really impressive plan. I mean, no one's doing this like WETA is doing it right now. So congratulations. Hopefully you keep it going.
That's really great to hear from you and Director Murphy. Very, I think it's miraculous what's been accomplished in such a, modest period of time. And it's not surprising to me that WETA is ahead of the pack when it comes to the way we're doing it. So I think that's kind of consistent with the way we go at things. So really, really appreciate it very much. Any other public members of the public wish to comment? Okay, not seeing any, I'll close the hearing on item 11, and we'll go to item number 12, review proposed fiscal year 2023-24 budget and salary schedule.
Thanks, Chair Wonderman. While Erin is making her way up, I'll just provide some introductory comments on the budget. The first is no surprise. This budget would look really different if we didn't have RM3 available. It really is a game changer, for the long term, but it's there's a lot of things we wouldn't be doing. We were looking at options for cutting service in FY24 because our federal money would be spent down. We certainly wouldn't be doing things like maintaining that service, hiring a whole crew of fuelers to be able to add in additional service in a really efficient way, creating a new WETA website that's going to have a lot of bells and whistles that we don't have today, implementing cost of living allowances and dispatcher wage increases, buying new temporary floats to explore new pilot services around the bay. Those are all things that we're only able to do because of RM3. And it goes back to our PRP goals. We moved forward with the pandemic recovery program because we had that federal money and we were being told that we needed to use it to achieve some things. We needed to achieve restoration of service. We needed to preserve jobs. Those were requirements for accepting those funds. We also added to that revamping our service to incentivize ridership return and enhance equity, lowered fares to be able to do that, and refocused our service plan to be able to attract and incentivize ridership along the way. Those goals made sense. They still make sense for a lot of reasons. Some of those that were tied to those federal conditions of bringing back service and not furloughing or laying off employees. We really took that to heart. This is the last year that we're going to be subject to those conditions. So, before RM3, we were looking at those cuts. RM3 allows us to continue those PRP goals and to pursue The increases in ridership that we've been able to realize has been successful so far. Hopefully, we'll be able to maintain those PRP principles beyond FY24. But eventually, we're going to need to look at how successful that program has been. How much ridership have we gained? What is the fare revenue associated with that ridership, and ask ourselves, even with RM3 in place, is the current path that we're on sustainable, and for how long? So we're bringing this budget to you. There are some increases over the prior year, and you'll remember the prior year budget was an increase over the year before that. We're conscious of that situation. We want to make sure that we're making good decisions along the way. And so if we get through another year of focusing on maximizing service and incentivizing demand, and that demand doesn't return, we owe it to our riders and our future riders to focus on financial sustainability and maybe adjust the service to fit the demand. But before we do that, we know that there are a lot of things that we're going to do in this fiscal year that are in this budget that will give us the best chance to bring those riders back, to bring that fare revenue back, and to continue to meet what we think are high expectations, and certainly to outperform our peers in that area. FY23 ridership is going to be 40% over what it was in FY22. This budget projects that FY24 ridership is going to grow another 11% over FY23. If all of that happens, we're going to end up carrying 230,000 riders in June of 2024, and that would be 90% of our average 2019 monthly ridership. So that's the goal that we're trying to achieve with this budget. I think there's a lot of work that this staff is going to be able to do to achieve that goal. I'll turn it over to Aaron to walk us through the budget.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just start by saying this work is a family effort. This is the budget staff right here. You'll see everybody had a piece in this, and I want to thank, one of our newest employees, Jennifer, who we borrowed and stole from Golden Gate, who put together the capital budget, and she hasn't even been here 6 months, so I appreciate her efforts on that. So I just want to start with a couple of, nothing that's in this presentation isn't in your packet. So it should look familiar if you had a second to look over the packet, but this is kind of a high level overview. So today we are just reviewing the draft because it is such a big and involved budget. We're giving you the draft today, and then in June we will come back with all of the necessary resolutions and ask for your approval of the budget. So at the very highest level, this is a $143 million budget. You can see the breakdown here. It's $68.4 million for operations and $75 million for capital projects in fiscal year 24. The funding for the budget overall, you can see the breakdown here again, $45 million in bridge toll. About half of that, by the way, is RM3. The rest is RM2 or 1. Federal funds, about half of that is for operating, the other half for capital. And then it goes down from there. And I'll walk you through some of this as we get through the components of the budget, but I just wanted you to see at a high level what's going on. This is our last year of COVID support, as Seamus said. We do have 2 new sources in the budget this year, the RM3 money that we've talked about significantly. We also are starting to use STA, which is state transit assistance money. Most transit agencies use this money every year for operating. We, in the past, have been consolidating. We get about $3 million a year. We've been banking that money for reserve. I think partly because we weren't sure what was happening with RM3, partly because we just really needed more reserves than we had. And so it was a good practice in the past. But now that we've done that, we can sit on those reserves and start using the incremental annual amounts to supplement the budget every year. So you'll see that in the operating budget. As we've talked about a lot, the hydrogen vessel is in this year's budget, as well as the Oakland Estuary demonstration project that Kevin sort of teased out, but we'll bring you more of the details next month. And then to support all of the things that we have been doing, as you know, we've been trying to keep the staff small until we knew what was happening with the school cliff. But we do have now added new capital staff, some operating staff. I'll walk you through all of that as we get to that part of the budget. We do have some ongoing challenges we are not facing an imminent fiscal cliff, but we do have revenues are lower and expenses are higher. That's just the bottom line. Particularly fuel and labor, which make up more than half of our budget. I've just sort of given you an example here that labor costs are up 38%. And, fair revenue is down. It's 2019. This is nothing you don't know. And for now, we have RM3 to support us. And it's, as Seamus said, we'll just, if a year from now, trends haven't improved, we'll talk about whether it makes sense to continue to use RM3 to support our current costs, because the hope for RM3, of course, was to expand the routes that we serve. So for the operating budget, it's a $68 million budget. That's made up of the direct ferry service budget, as well as $3.9 million for planning and administration. You can see from this pie chart, 90% of that is really just for ongoing service routes. 4% is for demonstration projects and 6% is for planning and administration. So for ferry services, we have $62 million for our 6 current routes. We have $3 million for the demonstration project, and that's a 9% year-over-year increase. And I'll walk you through what makes up the components and the changes in each component. But first, we're in a revenue slide. So what is funding the budget? Bridge toll revenue, 34%. 7.8 of that, $7.8 million of bridge toll money is RM3 bridge toll money. So we are beginning to use RM3 to supplement our operating budget. And as Seamus said, we would not have done that if RM3 weren't available. We would be in a different budget situation. We would have balanced to what we had. We would have, we were starting to work on cut scenarios. We didn't have to do that. You can see our fare revenue is still only 20%, which is pretty much what we have right now today. Fare revenue is going up by about $1 million. It's $11 million in the current year. It's a little more than 12 million for fiscal year 24. But the models that the planners have run basically say that by the end of the fiscal year, we hope to peak at 87% of our ridership from before the pandemic. Is that the right number? But we still have 31% of federal funds. So those go away next year. And so we'll have to see for the fiscal year 25 budget, we are hoping fair revenue can fill more of that gap.
So that's the end of the federal funding.
That's the end. We still have, Measure J funds for the Richmond Ferry. You'll see the new state transit assistance that we're putting in the budget is 5%. And then the other is mostly the donations and the funding for the demonstration projects. That's what that is.
Is there a sunset on the Measure J?
Yes, it's a 10-year fund source, and I think we're around here.
It's until the money runs out. And it doesn't become more than
Could be more than, yeah.
on current path.
Yeah. So delving into the breakdown of the ferry services budget, labor, fuel is $34 million. It's over half of the service budget. Last year, our fuel costs increased 40%. We're keeping that budget at the level. Right now, it's below that. So we do have some savings that we're hoping to get by the end of the year, but we're just being conservative and keeping that budget. Hopefully that will come down. We'll need fewer RM3, right? All things can change in 6 months. We'll see how that goes. But the labor, there were new labor contracts that fell into place last spring, summer, and those result in a 6% increase year over year for our vessel crews. Vessel maintenance repair, cost increase. Everything there are inflationary cost increases that every transit agency, every employer, everybody is seeing across the board, and we're not exempt from that. Part of that is we just have more vessels in service, so the more vessels you have, the more things cost, according to Tim. We are making some one-time investments in improving our spare part supply so that we can rely on those parts because a lot of them are long lead time items. That if we have them, in place, we can easily swap out part. Some of these are more expensive part, not consumables, but like spare engines for things like that. We also are making some one-time investments to improve the Wi-Fi, which we know customers have asked about in all of our surveys. And the boat fueling process, you'll see in the next slide, we are adding fuelers, but we also, it requires equipment in the boats to improve that process. So there are some one-time investments as well. In facilities, there's two different increases. We have wage increases for engineering staff. We are also adding fuelers. Right now, I think the boats are fueled by crews as well as engineering staff. And so Tim has worked with Longboat to talk about hiring fuelers, which would free up all of those people to do their actual jobs, taking care of the boats and perhaps getting the boats ready to turn around faster. And this is one of the examples of things we would not have added to the budget were it not for RM3. System expenses, it's really kind of a catch-all for everything that isn't those specific three things that I've already mentioned. So that increased 18% year over year. The WETA staff that are showing up first in the admin budget, some of their costs go directly to the operating budget. There's sort of a swap back and forth. So there are COLAs in the admin budget that I'll talk about that impact this. There are, one of the staff people that we're hiring will be under Tom to increase digital communications and have a person totally dedicated to that, which we think will really help grow ridership. It's a really ridership growth scenario to put resources towards that. More administrative staff around contracts and analysis. And then also included in this budget are increased dispatcher pay. We're having trouble hiring and retaining dispatchers, so we needed to address that. And then just for those of you who keep an eye on Clipper 2 may or may not be coming. And in a year, so for the next year, they're going to have to run both systems simultaneously. So the cost will be double next year. And then there are the demonstration projects that we've already talked about, the hydrogen ferry and the estuary shuttle, which for now we've put a placeholder of $1 million in the budget. It was an effort to kind of pre-identify that cost. It is not going to, it's going to be funded by a third party. So the funding for it is third party funding, but we'll talk more about that next month, or if you have questions, I'm sure he can answer some things now. Right, the button stopped working. Additionally, in system expense, staff costs flow through there. We had the one-time investment in the Bay Ferry website. Websites are expensive. They're $500,000. Dispatcher pay. Sorry, some of these are duplicates. Come across. Okay. Before I move on to planning and administration, any questions on the operating budget? Okay, so for planning and administration, $3.9 million. This is sort of the breakdown, mostly salaries and contracts, and then assorted office costs. Let's see. So
What's
the
transfer of administration expense?
So the way WETA's budget is structured, you take all of the the miscellaneous non-salary costs and whatever there's a formula that sort of follows how the federal government does it, where you say what are the salary to non-salary costs, and you transfer just a percent of your non-salary costs to just run the whole system over to the operating budget, and then it sort of helps account for what is the true cost of operating, basically, because they're not embedded in the operating contract or in the operating budget.
Does the personnel costs associated with capital expenditures and planning does that get accounted for in an indirect cost plan, or does it get lumped in with general administration?
The way our budget is set up, if you look at the detailed chart in your packet for the WETA administration, planning administration budget, you can see there's a line for what are the total salary costs. And then you can see a negative number, which shows direct charges to elsewhere. So what it does is it shows you the total cost, and then it shows you the direct charges. So for staff that we're charging to capital projects, who are working on capital projects, those go directly into the capital project budgets. So on the capital budget chart, if you have $1 million project, there is an assumption within that project of staff costs. So they sort of start on the books for you, so you can see what our salaries cost, overall to have WETA, the 20-some people that we're proposing. But then it comes off and goes into those budgets. That's a good question. It's a little complicated the way it's structured, and my goals for next year is to make it a little less complicated. We'll work down that route. So these are the staff that we are proposing to add. There are 5 of them. There will be a new accountant, a new administrative specialist, a communication specialist, and 2 project managers. And those 2 project managers are primarily will be funded by RM3 capital projects. And then we have a proposed 5.3 COLA. The practice in the past has been whatever the Bay Area CPI is this time of year. That is what we propose to do for WETA staff. Another thing we may not have been proposing were not for RM3, but as you know, everybody's having a hard time attracting and retaining good talent. We believe it's important to keep WETA staff on par with, what they were making last year. So talked about the project managers. When we get to the capital budget, you'll see we have not only 15 ongoing projects, but 12 new projects. So there's a lot to do. It's a big budget. It's a big work scope. In the budget document, we give you some highlights of what our work plan is. It doesn't capture everything, but there are all the things that we've been giving you presentations on. We have the business plan, the service vision. We have operating and capital plans we need to put together for RM3. We also have in a few years a new operating contract we will have to engage in, and that's an effort that we really need to start now, even though that contract doesn't expire until 2026. You need to really complete that process at least a year before you intend to execute it. So that's in the work plan. There are other things in there that we don't talk about specifically, but that are ongoing and that we are working on, like the Redwood City project. We'll take another look and make sure we've listed everything for you, but it's already a long document. We're trying to keep it from getting too long. We do have, again, in the work plan, all of our investments in community membership. We're trying to, step up our DBE work, and we also have some HR contracts that we're working on to improve our practices on that front. Finally, capital projects. It's a $75 million capital budget. This just shows you the breakdown. Here we have 21% for electrification, which is really just specific the stuff Chad is talking about, connecting to the grid and to facilities, whereas like our vessel projects are also electrification projects, but they're in the vessel construction category. That's the only difference. And you can see the list of all the projects in your packet. It's the last chart in the budget packet. So 15 ongoing, 12 additional projects. If you look in your packet as far as fiscal year 23, you will see we are behind on the cash flow for some of our current projects. We had hoped to be farther along, but some of it has to do with COVID, shipyard delays, labor delays. There's been an intentional delay on the Intentionally Mare Island electrification. We're replacing diesel boats with electric boats, and as Tim mentioned, we have the best in the business working on these things, but they have took a pause in order to bring on board a system integrator. I don't know what that means, that Tim can talk about it further if need be, but it's really important for building electric vessels to have, to make sure they use an integrator that we want them to use. So it's,
So for the 15 ongoing projects,
Yeah.
does that require new funds out of the 75 million, or were those pre-funded projects that are, going on, but they're not drawing on this 75 million? Which one is that?
so the 75 million represents sort of a cash flow view of the world. So to the extent it wasn't spent in this year, it was rolled into and it includes, so the 75 is not all new.
Not all
money.
new money.
Correct. To the extent we thought you were gonna spend 10 million last year using federal money and you only spent 2, then the 8 is in the 75. And so instead what we're doing is we just rolled it into the new year and that's reflected in the budget. I'll only have like 2 more slides. So 5 electric vessels, as we talked about before, they're, one of them is FTA funded. The rest are TIRCP, 3 small boats, 2 big boats. The float projects that Tim talked about, the IRCP funded, and then the short side electrification, it's RM3 and future TIRCP funded. Also, you will see in the new projects for fiscal year 24, now that we have RM3, we have $300 million available. What we tried to do, we didn't have a lot of time really to figure out what we could accomplish, but we knew what we wanted to do. So what you'll see in there is sort of the first year of trying to use RM3 as a kickstart for some projects that we, may or may not do right away, may or may not want to do in the long run. But we wanted to continue to study them, figure, so for example, Mission Bay, let's update the cost estimate. Let's figure out, it was before the pandemic hit ready to go, but now everything's changed. So, there's money in there to figure out, let's update the cost estimate, maybe do some value engineering, put some investment into Berkeley to see, move that along a little farther. The last time there that I think is pretty interesting is the temporary emergency floats. We wanted to do a little bit of study on whether or not the feasibility, availability, practicality of having emergency floats built and having them stored somewhere, so that in an emergency, to getting to the emergency part of our mission. So that's in the budget. It's in total $215 million worth of projects, but for these RM3 specific things, we just asked authority for the first year of these, and we will be coming back to you. You will have to approve the specifics of even the first year. There's a whole process. We have to bring you the forms that MTC requires. They call them the IPR, the initial project.
Are we in discussion with the city at this point, City of San Francisco, I should say, on Mission Bay? Is that an active conversation, or?
It is an active conversation. Seamus and Kevin are more involved than I am at the moment.
We're recosting.
What about demand studies for any of these projects?
That too. Need staff. Yeah.
Okay.
And then just the last slide, because this is actually not, I said all of this was in your packet. That was a lie. This one I realized was not in your packet. But just so entering fiscal year 24, what our reserves are. As I mentioned, we've been stocking away STA money. We now have $13.3 million set aside there, which is probably a good reserve for that. It's sitting at MTC. It's not in our bank account, but it's our money should we need it if there were an emergency. We have in our own bank account $10 million, which is really just a bare minimum in terms of cash flow and right on hand emergency funding that we would need. And then we have our capital reserve, which is held in our regional measure 1 accounts at MTC, and that we use every year for our federal state of good repair grant. So every year as we budget for a new state of good repair or vessel replacement projects, we tap into those, as the 20% matching, or we might use it, when we're applying for TIRCP, we might decide to use a little of that because we think we'll compete better for certain grants if we have a little skin in the game, right? So it's important, or, you know, if we have a horrible failure in some capital project and we need money right away, it's fairly accessible to us. We can easily get to it. So that is the super fast overview of a very large document.
So that capital reserve account, is there money coming into that account still?
Yes.
And
So we do get funds every year into that account. I want to say it's about $1 million a year. I'll double check that. It might be a little more than that. Yeah, but we are actively using it every year. We do program. It's a little high right now, partly because we didn't program a lot of new RM1 funds this year. So there's a little extra this year. Yeah,
Great.
but that is a pot that continues, and we need for it to continue because we need for it, our repair and replacement should continue. Otherwise, we'll be in the boat of some transit agencies that haven't invested in capital because they don't have enough capital money to keep their.
So RM3 capital reserve, will that end up in a different bucket? Or will that just be held by MTC until we need it, or?
Yeah, it's a different bucket and it will be held by MTC. We don't get the interest. Oh, we should ask, but it's 300 million. We are in active conversations with them about cash flow. You know, they have a capital program, you know, they have a cash flow problem, right? Everybody wants their money up front, right? So we're in active conversation. We're actually a good player for them because we're saying we only want 14 million this year from you, is what we're saying in our capital program, where it's BART, right? Wants all their money all the time. So that's a separate, we have actually two RM3 pots of money, and Seamus can speak more eloquently than I can. We have our operating funds, which is one pot. And then to the extent we don't use those sit in that pot for us, right? Unlike RM2, which was a use it or lose it situation. It's 35 million a year. If we don't use it, it's still our money. We can bank it. And actually there'll be a presentation coming up about RM3 as part of the RM3 plans that the planning folks are going to bring to you next month. So 300 million capital, and then the ongoing 35 million for.
I saw a notation from the treasurer, I think, you know, stating that we did receive interest. So is that on something other than?
So yeah, that's our the LAIF, the $10 million reserve. We have just under state law, we're supposed to inform you of our investment earnings, and since we're invested in LAIF, we get, that's just the earnings on that $10 million basically. That's what that is.
And we get to keep that interest?
That's ours.
But RM3, we don't get to keep it?
We'll confirm.
Yeah, we'll confirm. Yeah.
Stephen, we want interest.
Yeah.
You are a lawyer,
Looking it up right now.
right? Huh?
No one's ever, you can, I can tell you they're not offering it.
I've asked about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Is it not ours because it doesn't say it's ours, or is it not ours because it says it's not ours? Because that's,
Where's it all been? No,
Yeah.
but it's been. Well,
yeah, I mean, now, yeah. Okay.
phantom money right
I
now.
asked a number of questions going along, so I think I satisfied myself. So other members of the board with questions on the budget?
I don't have a question. Good job and thanks for putting it together, well organized, easy to understand, easy to read. My only comment would be just on, again, going forward, we've talked about this too, on local, like Measure J itself, as we're moving forward and we're working with cities. It's nice to see like Measure J actually has skin in the game. So, you know, I know it's not a lot, but it does help, and it puts you know, some investment from the local community. So as we move forward with these communities, it would be nice to see that they would put an effort into some kind of regional measure to get something done. You know, we come in and build capital, they help out with something. So it's on there. It helps. So good job. Thank you.
Yeah.
Board members, other questions?
Just back to the 35 million per year for RM3 in operating, right? Did I get that right?
We're under the measure, we
Funded.
get 35 million a year. That's not how much we're using this year, but yes.
Right, so we're estimating that we are using
7.8.
Okay,
We
And
don't
then
get 35 million this year, correct?
We,
It ramps up. Year one is $10 million. Year two is 15. Year three is 20. Year four is 25. Then it goes to-
What year are we in?
We're in year 5. We will, this FY 24 will be. So we are working with MTC to identify how much of the prior 4 years will
You want
be
to take?
provided to us right away. And there may be some amount that needs to be provided to us over time later that we're due. And there are some differing interpretations within RM3 about whether MTC can reduce the shares in the initial ramp up years. And we're working through that with them right now.
it should be based on what's been collected.
For sure.
Yeah.
That too.
Oh, yeah. And so operating funds that are not used they roll over.
Correct. For
And
RM3.
can they be used for capital if we want
They are
to?
flexible.
Okay. Great, fantastic.
Other questions from the board or comments?
Oh, the next one report.
Yes.
Yeah, really,
Hour to read it.
It's,
Very
it certainly reflects an expansionistic, normally in a public agency, when you come in with a bunch of new positions, we would probably more take you to task, but I think, we're cognizant of the, demand for professional services to, for a growing operation. So I think it's a right investment. Whether it's enough or, I don't know, we'll see, I guess, in the future, but, I think we're asking a lot. And it's a modest sized staff. So congratulations to all of you for doing what you do. And thanks for the presentation, Aaron. But before you go, let's see if there's anybody from the public signed up to talk about the budget. Anyone here like to comment? Anyone in the public wants to comment? None of you want to ask for a raise? Because boss is right there. Yeah, you better quiet down, Tim. Keep it calm. Anyone in the public, on the virtual public, wish to comment on the budget, ask a question? Okay, if not, let's close the informational budget item. Thanks, Aaron. That's a really good report. Let's go to item number 13, non-agenda items. Melanie, has anyone signed up to speak on item number 13? Anyone here wish to say something? Anyone in the virtual group wish to comment? If not, let me thank, this was a great meeting, a lot of wonderful information. Let's keep them coming and keep up the good work. So thanks, meeting's adjourned. I'm gonna make my ferry at 4:25. I got a lot of time. I thought you were a communication specialist. What do you need?
We need to clone Tom.
I told him you got through this meeting quick because the Warriors hit.